Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So this night was pretty lackluster. We had a bunch of fights fall off this card unfortunately. It was Ikram Aliskerov versus Antonio Tricoli and the Dragir Ulanbekov versus Joshua Van fight. Two highly touted prospects, or three technically, but two very interesting fights. But we saw a few good fights tonight. And before we get started, hit that like button. And if you like my video, be sure to subscribe. So without further ado, let's get right into the recap. Josephine Knutson versus Julia Polistri. Knutson showed she was levels beyond Polistri on the feet as she harassed and frustrated her with front kicks, combos, and knees to the body. The takedown defense was a big hole for her tonight, so she will need to tighten that up if she's going to be a legit factor at strawweight. Very entertaining curtain jerker nonetheless, and a great unanimous decision for Knutson. Next up, we have Costa versus Shaylin Nurdenbeke. These guys put on a fun grappling bout for the first two rounds. However, Nurdenbeke got tired in the third round. Costa was able to shove him down, slide into position for the fight-ending choke. Very good showing for Costa. He showed creativity, composure, and a killer instinct once his opponent got tired. Great submission win for Shaylin, and I'm interested to see who they'll match him up with next. Next up, we have Jekka Saragi versus Weston Wilson. This was a great showcase for Wilson, but Jekka's low fight IQ moments gave Wilson a lot of help. Wilson saved his skin with this one. Jekka got smoked and embarrassed after that scrap. Got subbed 1 minute and 49 seconds into the very first round. Weston Wilson was also on the chopping block for this fight, because if he lost, he probably would have got cut. Next up, we got Carly Judas versus Gabriela Fernandez. These ladies put on a great scrap. Judas was very game from opening to closing bell, but Fernandez was sharper and more powerful, especially on the feet and earlier on in the fight. However, she did fade in the third, but not enough for Judas to fully capitalize on it. Very interested at who they'll put her up against next, because that was a pretty fun fight, especially for WMMA. Next up, we got Jimmy Flick versus Nathan Manis. This was a gutsy fight from both men, but Manis was always leading the striking exchanges. He had some nice success in the grappling exchanges too, and avoided Flick's Hail Marys at the end. It was looking like Flick might find a few submissions, but he was grabbing his ribs a little bit, so it might have hindered him in the third round. Next up, we have Josh Quinlan versus Adam Fugit. There were a couple of very close rounds in this fight. It could have gone either way though. The longer the fight went, Fugit was pulling away, but it was still a super competitive fight throughout. However, it did end in a split decision. Fantastic fight. Josh Quinlan was as game as they come, but Adam Fugit reigned supreme and got the decision. Next up, we have Asu Alambayev versus Jose Johnson. Alambayev just dominated Johnson with his relentless takedowns, top pressure, and back control. Johnson was a game opponent, and his size gave Alambayev some issues, but he was never in a position to win this one. Jose, that is. Very fun fight that was predominantly on the ground. Definitely a prospect you want to keep your eyes on, especially if you bet, because I don't see Alambayev getting fraud checked anytime soon. Next up, we have probably the best fight on the card, with Brady Highstand versus Garrett Armfield. This was a great performance from Highstand, especially in a very fun fight. He was relentless in pursuing Armfield with takedowns and then chain grappling. He had Armfield in trouble a few times before eventually getting the tap with a rear naked choke. In the second round, he was lucky to survive getting knocked down, but that shouldn't take away from this showing. One of the better fights, if not the best fight we've seen so far tonight. Fantastic grit and heart showed by both gentlemen. Next up, we got Timothy Kuwamba versus Lucas Almeida. Lucas Almeida looked very composed and dangerous throughout the fight, sniping Timmy with sharp and heavy strikes. Kuwamba showed a lot of toughness, but he was well beaten in this matchup. I'm interested to see how he will come back in his next fight, and as the old saying goes, you learn more from your defeat, or you learn more from defeat than you do in victory. Next up, we have Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Miles Johns. I'm just going to say it, I didn't really agreed with the decision. Johns was looking for a single shot in the entire fight, while Douglas Da Silva was more active, didn't get caught with anything hard from Johns. And outside of accuracy, it's hard to see how you can score the fight as lopsided as they did. But there was one funny moment in this fight. At the very end, they tried to do the Max Holloway moment, pointing down at the ground, and barely landed anything. They were just chirping back and forth, and yeah, it was honestly pretty pathetic to point down at the ground and then do nothing. Next up, we have an unfortunate fight, but it was a good one for Tatsuro Taira versus Alex Perez. Taira remains undefeated, but this fight didn't really answer any questions for us. He was losing the striker's game, he got a takedown, and was working for a choke. He created a situation which blew out Perez's knee, but it wasn't something he did on purpose. It was during the takedown. If you watch the legs, he had his leg outstretched behind Perez's knee, and when they fell, you can see that's where his knee blew out. So it was a pretty lackluster fight, but still excited to see how good Tatsuro Taira really is, because this guy is an animal, especially once he tightens up his boxing and figures out the kick game a little bit more. But yeah, this was a pretty bad fight night, to be honest. There were a couple good fights, but with the Joshua Van and Tagir Ulanbekov fight falling off, it really didn't have much excitement behind it, as well as the Ikram Aliskerov versus Antonio Tricoli. But on the good side, we do see Ikram versus Robert Whittaker fighting, which is going to be an interesting fight, but definitely not as much of a layup as Antonio Tricoli would be. But yeah, if you guys like the content, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys have a great week.